we have to be extra careful about picking our spots. And when I say that, we think about the global economy and being in markets that have a high level of international travel, both for business and leisure. We think about markets in the Pacific Alliance countries that are facing Asia, doing business with Asia, where our brands are well recognized. And those are the markets that end up being the ones that we are most focused on. Markets like Lima, markets like Santiago, Mexico City. These are areas where we can make sense of having our brands, and we know that having people recognize our brands in these markets will drive recognition of Hyatt, which again, being much smaller, we think we play above our weight in terms of brand recognition because we're really focused on those kinds of markets.
Well, you mentioned Chile. You've had a long experience in Chile with both the Hyatt and the Park Hyatt brand. Given those destinations where they don't have an economic volatility at this point, you can get the rate.
You can get the rate in those markets. Now, of course, Santiago has had some supply growth recently, which at least in the moment creates challenge for us when we're out looking for deals and trying to get them underwritten. The good news is when you look at a market like Santiago, you can project forward and say, historically, this market has had better stability than a lot of other markets in the region and can get beyond this blip in supply that for a period of time may impact occupancy.
Is it safe to say, and this is for all three gentlemen here, that instability is a given, but resilience is what you hope for?
Yeah, that's well said.
I mean, does that define the region?
Yeah, I think you have to have a long-term view. Brazil has been a very difficult market, but none of us have given up on growing in Brazil. We still keep our teams there. We're still operating there. We're working with our owners. But you got to really take the long-term view.
And you also have to work with the owners that understand this. Because if somebody's in it for a short-term gain, we got a problem.
Right.
You talked about local talent in terms of staffing your hotels, in terms of the management positions. It's about dealing with the culture. It's about understanding the culture, embracing the culture, and also admitting what you don't know. How do you do that?
Well, I think it starts probably with our development team. We have people that are born and raised in the region, speak the languages, know the cultures, so we've been at it for a long period of time. I'm not one of them, but I have the team that can do that. So, we're very respectful of, even within each country, how different things can be. One country may be more formal, one country may be more personal. So adapting your style to whether it be the owners or the guests in a given market. Example of guests, Holiday Inn Express standard would have a standardized breakfast with the cinnamon roll and so forth, just like our other brand compadres have. But in certain countries, that just doesn't cut it. You have to adapt the menu. You have to maybe let them open a bar at a Holiday Inn Express, which is against our rules. So adapting both to the guest and to the owner is very important.
So you're telling me you never broke the rules?
No.
No bar?
No bars, but
what about language?
Next door, maybe.
What about language?
Language in terms of?
Meaning, you're not a big Spanish speaker.
No, I'm not. But my team is, so they're the ones out in the trenches with the projects.
David?
Well, if you're talking about development, first and foremost, I agree with Craig. We have a great team, very proud of our team. They speak the languages in the markets where they exist. You heard Paula up here right before us, speaks Spanish and Portuguese. Camilo, fluent Spanish speaker who knows the markets and knows the people. But beyond that, it's about, once you get the hotel open, having the right talent in place and having a great local team that can tap into that local talent, bring them in place, and create a team that will provide the service we need to be providing. And there's certain cultures that embrace providing service, and there are others where they maybe take a little more training and a little more nurturing in order to provide the kind of service that we want to provide.
I mean, I've seen so many examples in other aspects of travel and tourism where brands try to dictate the cultures and it just explodes. Not in a good way, right? But all three of you work for companies that are not based in this region. they all have different standards and practices. They all have, the same kind of towels and the same kind of soap at certain, at what point do you break those rules to basically adapt to the culture?
Well, it's informed our strategy. I mean, as a company, we've been in business for 60 years. We manage roughly 70% of the hotel rooms in our company. And for many years, we were very opposed to the idea of franchising. In more recent years, we've discovered that in many markets, being open to the notion of franchising helps you team with companies that are knowledgeable in the market, know the market, are better at selling within the market, and actually can be great partners. So we have more recently partnered with companies like GHL, like Talbot, like Grupo Diestra that are in market and can manage hotels as well as we can as long as we partner in the right way.
Local knowledge.
Right.
But I think of an example with you, Craig, with an Intercontinental Hotel in Cozumel. Checked in one day, having been to many Intercontinental hotels, went into the bathroom, the towels were the size of small countries. And I said to the general manager, this doesn't strike me as an IHG hotel just based on the towels. He said, we revolted against headquarters, we got our own towels.
Well, it's a resort, too. You want,
Yeah,
nicer
but still,
towels, better towels.
Yeah. I mean, do you see that happening more?
Well, there is a balance. I think Craig gave a good example. Each of our brands have brand standards, but something like the breakfast, you really have to adapt to the local market. So it's trying to balance it. You don't want the hotel to get too far out there that your loyal Hilton guest or Holiday Inn guest gets to the property and says, this isn't what I expected. But you need to do subtle adaptations to the local market. And then I'd just like to add, as far as employees and adapting to the culture, myself, I've been in the region for 13 years, and I got here because we acquired Hilton International, and we needed somebody to oversee the region that could communicate with the headquarters, but also could get things done here. And our rule has been, it's basically everybody is local, like you said. My role was to translate to the headquarters. And I think if you think you can come down here and get them to adapt to the American way, have all Americans, it's just not going to work.
So your challenge and your challenge and your challenge is to educate your upper management.
Well, it's to educate upper management, and it's to groom the next generation of hotel developers in the region. When I started, there really weren't a lot of potential candidates. We're grooming young, high-potential individuals that soon will be sitting in this chair and doing a much better job than I do.
I want you to each think of an example where you wanted to develop a hotel in the region. Headquarters was soft on the idea. You knew more than they did at that point. You fought the battle, and you won. Can you think of one?
The one
Can
that
you
comes
think of a few?
I can think of more than one, but the one that comes to mind is we wanted to do a strategic alliance with the largest operator in Brazil, a company called Atlantica, and we wanted to give them the rights to develop our DoubleTree brand in Brazil. Within Hilton, the brand people were against it. There was just a lot of momentum.
Were there any DoubleTrees at that point?
There were none at that point, and it was quite a fight. And eventually, the CEO backed me, and we got it done. But it was very contentious, and it's because things aren't necessarily done the same way in Brazil that they are in Atlanta, Georgia, and it was an interesting exercise. But that goes on all the time, and I'm sure you guys have the same experiences.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not thinking of a specific one I wouldn't want to call out exactly, but...
Oh, take a shot.
I mean, I think... I knew you'd say that. I mean, a lot of times where we sort of fight the internal battle is when maybe things are a little different than what we normally do up in North America. Room sizes, for example, too small. Obviously, fire life safety is a big issue, and conversions of properties in this region are very difficult because they frequently have one staircase. So we do have some of those battles we fight, if you will, internally. I think we come back with reasonable conclusions on those, and I don't think we're unreasonable about pursuing the opportunities.
David?
Yeah, I think probably our biggest challenge is a relatively conservative bias in how we do underwriting. And I think that, again, part of our history, and because we often have been a pretty active investor in our growth activity, the way we're structured for underwriting is our feasibility team reports up to the CFO, not up through development, which creates an appropriate level of objectivity. The challenge is oftentimes the people doing the underwriting don't have the on-the-ground knowledge that our development teams do. And so there's a fair bit of tension in trying to help someone sitting at a desk in Chicago fully appreciate that you can't simply look in the rearview mirror to make a judgment about what the future outlook is for an opportunity. And I think we encounter that fairly frequently, and that's where having a good development team that can be compelling in making its case is crucial.
We have a saying that when the accountants run the asylum, everybody goes crazy. Would that be careful? Would that be appropriate? You can say yes. Come on, you can say it.
I think they do a good job. I think they need to be. We're always trying to educate.
What a beautiful political answer. Wasn't that wonderful? You mentioned fire safety. I want to talk about that for a second because we're dealing with codes, and every country's got a different code, and some of the codes would not even be close to the codes that we have in America. And there's some codes in America that are pathetic as well. How do you educate the owners about the need for doing it beyond code?
Well, I mean, our standards dictate that we're beyond their local codes. We're, NFPA, I think all of us are probably in the same camp. So I think it's really finding solutions, creative solutions, whether it be, adding a second staircase outside the building so you don't lose rooms. But really just emphasizing the importance of how important it is to have a safe building, that if something happens in your building, it's going to take down your business if you weren't really up to international standards.
So basically, you're sprinkling everything. You're going up.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I think there's two types of projects. One is new development, and it's pretty stringent what you have. The conversions,
that's where
the creativity's not the right word, but where you try to find various solutions, like can you put an exterior stairwell in? Is it a low-rise building so you don't need it sprinklered? We look at various alternatives, but the worst nightmare for any international company is to read one day in the newspaper that there's been a major fire with major deaths. It's just...
And by the way, just to put this in perspective, in California, there are certain codes that are so pathetic that if your grandfather started the hotel and he gave it to your father and he gave it to you and there was no change in ownership, you're not required to retrofit to current code.
Wow.
That is crazy. So education is a big deal. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about some growth opportunities here. Looking at the region, we talked about a little bit earlier today about this as well, but it bears repeating in terms of where you see the crystal ball. Where are you looking right now? I mean, obviously, you've got a great track record in Chile, in Peru. You know what you're doing there. But where are you looking right now that you think, maybe I now have to educate Chicago because we really think this is going to happen?
Well, I think because of our presence in most markets, we have a couple, 3 hotels. We're proud that we have roughly 50 hotels in the region. 10 years ago, we had 8. But we're still minuscule compared to a lot of companies. So really what we're doing now is going back into markets where we have presence and figuring out what's the right next product to bring in. We bought Two Roads Hospitality last year, a company steeped in experiential, immersive travel, which is really where the consumer is heading today. And that brought 4 new brands into our system that we can now really look at growing, which we think are really perfect for a lot of markets in South America.
Greg?
Yeah, I mean, we've grown extensively in Peru, I mentioned this morning. We still are, but I think that market is, we saw some of the statistics, is really seeing some signs of that supply impacting things. So I think, like David said, we have a lot of new brands that we've brought in that we're looking at in each place. Outside of South America, Central America, if we include Mexico, it's actually one of the top 5 or 6 countries that we have across the globe in terms of targeting growth. So you mentioned we're the largest there, and we want to continue to be the largest.
Ted?
Well, our biggest market is Mexico, where we have 65 hotels operating and another 30 in the pipeline. As far as pipeline deals, after Mexico comes Peru. And then we've been really focusing for the past few years on Brazil, where we have 7 hotels right now. We have 6 in the pipeline. And when you look at the size of Brazil and the size of the economy, it's the second largest economy in Latin America.
Oh, it's still staggering.
Yeah. And we're going to continue to focus and try to find a winning formula in Brazil. And the market that's been surprising to me recently has been Costa Rica. Costa Rica went through, in 2004, 2005, it was the flavor of the month. Things just, the bottom just fell out of everything, and it's having.
Do you know why?
I think because tourism dropped off. Maybe you.
No, I'm listening because I'm surprised to hear it because tourism has always been their big strong point.
When the U.S. entered the recession, you saw a huge drop-off in visitation there. In 2004, 2005, in the Guanacaste area, every luxury brand was proposing to do a hotel. Most of it didn't happen. We're seeing a resurgence there. We're also seeing a lot of activity in San Jose, more commercial-oriented activity.
Earlier today you saw the statement about how many millennials are taking over the world. 5 years ago, I would have said our obsession with the millennials is a little ridiculous, that most millennials are sitting at home with a Budweiser hoping that a Heineken shows up and that they really don't have the money. Well, I may be corrected now, 5 years later, because they're starting to have the money. So my question to you, to all 3 of you, is to what extent are you watching these demographic shifts and also trying to guard against them taking precedence over common sense?
Well, a lot of our branding activity is really foremost the millennials are in mind. A product like True is really geared towards the millennials. But in my life, millennials permeate my life in all areas. Virtually my whole development team are millennials. I'm a baby boomer, and it's been
so you have a landline.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just double-checking.
Exactly. So it's been an interesting experience, and you adapt. You adapt to what's out there.
Yeah, I think a lot of the new brands we're developing are focused on that age demographic and millennials. You mentioned True, we have Avid, we now have Atwell Suites, Even Hotels, a wellness-focused brand in the upscale segment. So a lot of the new things we're doing are clearly to attract them, but we also are adapting our existing brands to move the age demographic down and to appeal to that younger demographic so that it's attractive without alienating the baby boomers still, because there's still a significant number of them traveling.
Yeah, 2 guys still have a landline,
Right.
David?
Well, age and generation matters for certain. But we're really trying to, really what transcends age and generation is shifts in consumer trends. Conscious consumerism, kind of my life, my way, I want everything tailored, and really focused on how I want to live my day and experience travel. Wellness, $640 billion industry, wellness tourism.
Which still has to be defined, by the way, but that's another story.
It has to, but without a doubt, 70% of affluent travelers say they want to incorporate wellness in some way in their travel experience. Business travelers, 20% shift in business travelers from 5 years ago saying they wanted to incorporate a leisure activity into their trip versus today. We look at all of these things and we try to we use that as a way to inform how we're thinking about our brands.
Sure, but there's also the danger of listening to focus groups, because they'll all tell you they want a pool, and you can all tell me what your utilization of the pool is at the hotel or the health club.
Sure.
But you still have to have it.
You don't have to have it. You don't have to have it. You need to understand what does the market offer and what is your typical guest in that market seeking. And then make a smart decision about what that specific hotel truly does need.
So if we're going to do a new brand for the millennials, it should be called Selfish Wellbeing. And on that happy note, please thank Ted, Craig, and David.